A carpenter arrived to fix a door in the Millionaire's house and froze when he saw his photo in a black frame. The Manhattan morning sun cast long shadows across Fifth Avenue as Jason Reynolds pulled his old pickup truck alongside the immaculate sidewalk fronting the Robertson mansion. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, running a calloused hand through his dark hair, noticing the flecks of gray that had appeared in recent years. At 38, Jason's face carried the weathered look of a man who worked with his hands, handsome in a rugged way, with eyes that revealed both strength and sadness. "Don't embarrass me," he muttered to his truck as he gathered his toolbox and the portfolio containing his restoration sketches. The contrast between his vehicle and the luxury cars lining the street couldn't have been more stark. The Robertson mansion stood like an ancient fortress amid the modern high-rises, a relic of old New York money that refused to bow to changing times. 3 stories of weathered limestone with arched windows and intricate cornices. It whispered of secrets and old wealth. As Jason approached the imposing front entrance, he felt a familiar tension in his shoulders, the working-class reflex of entering spaces not meant for people like him. 8 years of raising his daughter Zoe alone had taught him to swallow that discomfort and do whatever job paid the bills. The massive oak door swung open before he could knock. An older woman in a crisp uniform regarded him with practiced neutrality. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Jessica Moore, the head housekeeper. Mr. Peterson mentioned you'd be arriving to assess the restoration work." "That's right, the east wing doors and some window frames." "From what I understand," Jessica nodded, "Mrs. Robertson is hosting her garden club this morning, and Mr. Kenneth is resting. If you'll follow me to the main hall, I'll have you wait there while I gather the house plans you'll need." Jason followed her through the entrance foyer, their footsteps echoing against marble floors. The interior smelled of beeswax and old money, polished wood, aged leather, and something else he couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the scent of time itself. "Please wait here," Jessica said, gesturing to an ornate bench in the grand hall. "I'll return shortly." Alone, Jason's craftsman eye immediately took in the exquisite woodwork surrounding him. Hand-carved moldings, quarter-sawn oak paneling, the kind of craftsmanship that had largely disappeared from the modern world. His fingers itched to touch it, to feel the grain patterns that told stories of growth and survival. That's when he saw it. On the far wall, among a collection of portraits and landscapes, hung a painting that seemed to absorb the light around it. An ornate black frame with silver detailing contained a portrait of a young woman with 2 newborn infants in her arms. Something about the painting pulled at him, a gravitational force he couldn't explain. Jason stood, moving toward it as if in a trance. The closer he got, the faster his heart raced. The woman's face, those eyes, that gentle smile. He knew them, not from some half-remembered dream or passing resemblance, but from the photographs he'd clung to after the fire. This was Sarah Reynolds, his mother. The blood in his veins turned to ice. Those babies in her arms, that was him and Greg, his twin brother who had died in the fire that took their mother when they were just 8 years old. This was their portrait, the one that had hung in their modest living room before the flames consumed everything. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. The portrait, nicknamed the Black Frame by his father for its distinctive ebony border, had been destroyed along with everything else in the 1995 fire. How could it be here, hanging in the mansion of one of New York's wealthiest families, perfectly preserved as if time had never touched it? "Mr. Reynolds?" Jason nearly jumped at Jessica's voice behind him. He turned, struggling to compose his expression. "I see you found one of Mr. Kenneth's treasured pieces," she said, her eyes studying him curiously. "It's interesting," Jason managed. "The frame is quite unusual. Yes, the black portrait, as the family calls it. A sentimental piece for Mr. Kenneth, though I don't know the full story behind it. Mrs. Linda, his wife, doesn't care for it much, says it doesn't match the other artwork." Before Jason could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps drew their attention. A man appeared at the entrance to the hall. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that screamed old wealth. His salt and pepper hair was styled perfectly, his expression cold and calculating. "Jessica, Mother is asking for the Severus tea set, apparently. The regular china isn't good enough for her garden club parasites." His eyes landed on Jason, narrowing slightly. "And this is..." "Mr. Reynolds, sir," the restoration specialist for the East Wing. The man, who Jason guessed was Robert Robertson, looked him over with the practiced assessment of someone who valued things, not people. "I trust Peterson verified your credentials thoroughly." Jason nodded, professional smile firmly in place. "Yes, sir. I've restored woodwork for several historical properties in the city, including the Vandermeer estate last year." Robert's skepticism was palpable. "Well, we'll need this done properly. Many of these pieces date back to the founding of the family fortune. Irreplaceable." "I understand completely." Robert seemed about to say something else when a figure appeared in the shadowed doorway behind him. A man of similar age to Jason, but with a starkly different presence. The right side of his face bore the unmistakable marks of old burn scars, partially hidden by hair combed forward. He wore a simple black suit, the uniform of a chauffeur. "Ah, gee," Robert said without looking at the man. "Tell Mother her driver is ready when she is. God forbid she walk the 3 blocks to her luncheon." The man, G, never spoke. He simply nodded once, his eyes briefly meeting Jason's across the room. Something in that gaze sent a jolt through Jason's body, a flash of recognition that made no sense. As G turned to leave, Jessica cleared her throat. "Sir, I've brought the floor plans. Shall I show Mr. Reynolds to the East Wing now?" "Yes, fine," Robert waved dismissively. "Just make sure he understands the value of what he's dealing with. And keep him away from the West Wing entirely. Father is not to be disturbed." After Robert left, Jessica gave Jason an apologetic look. "Sorry about that, shall we?" As they walked, Jason fought to maintain his professional composure, but his mind was spinning. The portrait, his mother's portrait. "Here, in this house. Jessica," he asked carefully, "how long has that portrait, the black portrait, been in the family?" She considered the question. "I'm not entirely sure. I've only been here 5 years, but I believe it was Martha, the previous housekeeper, who brought it into the household. She was with the family for decades before me. Is she still around?" "No," Jessica said softly. "She passed 2 years ago." Jason nodded, filing away this information. Whatever connection existed between his family and the Robertsons, the answers had just become harder to find, but he would find them. He silently vowed to extend this job as long as necessary to discover how his mother's portrait had ended up in this mansion, and what it meant for the fragments of his shattered past. As they continued toward the East Wing, Jason felt eyes on his back. Turning slightly, he caught a glimpse of G watching him from the shadows of a doorway, his scarred face unreadable, but his eyes intensely focused, like a sentinel guarding secrets that had been buried for far too long. 3 days into the restoration work, Jason had established a routine. He arrived early, before the household fully stirred, and lost himself in the meticulous work of breathing life back into century-old wood. The East Wing doors had suffered from decades of neglect, veneer peeling in places, ornate carvings dulled by layers of inappropriate polish, brass fittings tarnished to a muddy brown. But it was the hours after his official workday, when he should have been heading home to Zoe, that Jason found most valuable. His babysitter, Mrs. Kelly, had agreed to extended hours, allowing him time to carefully explore the mansion under the pretense of assessing additional restoration needs. "You coming home for dinner tonight, Dad?" Zoe had asked that morning, her small fingers adjusting the Batman backpack that seemed too large for her 8-year-old frame. "I'll try, sweetheart. This job is complicated." Now, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the marble floors, Jason carefully traced his fingers along the wood grain of a hallway panel near the library. The Robertson mansion was a labyrinth of history, each corridor telling its own story, but none of those stories explained why his mother's portrait hung in the grand hall. Closing his eyes, Jason was pulled into memories he'd spent years trying to suppress. The acrid smell of smoke, the suffocating heat, the sound of his father's desperate screams for Sarah and Greg as 8-year-old Jason stood frozen in the front yard, clutching his stuffed dinosaur while his world burned. The wiring was faulty, the fire inspector had said, but Jason's father never believed it. There was nothing wrong with that wiring, Jack Reynolds would mutter during his increasingly frequent drinking binges. Nothing wrong at all. 2 years later, when the state removed Jason from his father's custody, Jack had gripped his son's shoulders with trembling hands. Remember the black frame, Jason. Remember it was special to your mother. It's not just a painting, it's proof. But proof of what? His father never said. And within 5 years, Jack Reynolds drank himself to death, leaving 15-year-old Jason alone with questions that had no answers. You seem quite interested in the woodwork beyond your assigned area. The voice startled Jason from his memories. Linda Robertson stood at the end of the hallway, a cold smile playing on her lips. Despite her 65 years, she carried herself with the rigid posture of someone who controlled every aspect of her life, and preferred to control others as well. Her tailored cream suit probably cost more than Jason made in a month. Mrs. Robertson. Jason nodded respectfully. The craftsmanship throughout the house is exceptional. As a woodworker, it's hard not to admire it. Indeed. Her gaze was sharp, assessing. Robert mentioned you were working on the East Wing doors, yet I find you near the library. Just finishing up for the day, I was admiring the panel work on my way out. Linda's perfectly manicured fingers brushed an invisible speck from her sleeve. Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate professional curiosity, but I must insist you stick to your assigned areas. This house has been in my husband's family for generations. Many rooms contain valuable and delicate items. Of course, I apologize if I overstepped. No harm done, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I understand you've taken an interest in one of our paintings as well. Jason's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his expression neutral. The one in the main hall, the black portrait, it caught my eye. The frame has interesting detailing. Yes, a rather gloomy piece. Kenneth insists on keeping it prominently displayed, though it hardly fits the aesthetic of the room. Her eyes never left Jason's face. Do you have a particular interest in portraiture, Mr. Reynolds? Not specifically. I just appreciate craftsmanship in all forms. Linda made a non-committal sound. Well, I won't keep you. I'm sure your family is waiting. Just my daughter, Jason said, immediately regretting the personal disclosure. Single father, widowed, 3 years now. Something flickered across Linda's face. Not quite sympathy, perhaps calculation. How tragic. Children need a complete family. I raised Robert alone after his father died. Until I met Kenneth, of course. It was challenging. The conversation was taking an uncomfortably personal turn. I should be going. Thank you for your understanding about the woodwork. As Jason gathered his tools, he felt Linda's eyes following him. There was something predatory in her gaze that made his skin crawl outside. The evening air provided welcome relief. The Robertson mansion, for all its grandeur, had begun to feel oppressive. As he approached his truck, he noticed the distinctive figure of G.E., standing beside a sleek black town car parked nearby. The chauffeur was meticulously polishing the vehicle's surface. His movements precise and economical. Jason hesitated, then approached. Evening? G looked up, his scarred face momentarily startled. He nodded once in acknowledgement but didn't speak. I'm Jason Reynolds, working on the East Wing restoration. He extended his hand, but G merely looked at it before returning to his polishing. Sorry, Jason said, lowering his hand. I didn't mean to interrupt. G shook his head slightly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad and pen. He wrote quickly and held it up. Can't talk, not won't, can't. Oh, Jason said, genuinely surprised. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. G shrugged, then wrote again. Burns damaged vocal cords. Long ago, something cold settled in Jason's stomach as he studied the man's scars more carefully. Burn scars, just like the memories that haunted his dreams. G appeared to be roughly his age, with dark hair similar to his own, despite the scarring. Were you born here at the mansion, I mean? G's eyes narrowed slightly. He wrote again, more slowly this time. Came with Martha after she retired. Martha, the former housekeeper. A nod. You knew her well. Another nod, more emphatic. I've heard she was with the family for many years, Jason ventured carefully. G studied Jason's face, a strange intensity in his gaze. He wrote again, the message sending a chill down Jason's spine. She saved me. Before Jason could ask what he meant, the mansion's front door opened, and Robert emerged calling sharply, G, Mother needs to be at the opera in 30 minutes. G pocketed his notepad and moved quickly to the driver's seat. As the town car pulled away, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter had been significant. that G knew something about Martha, about the portrait, perhaps even about Jason himself. Back in his truck, Jason sat for several minutes, mind racing. The portrait of his mother, Martha the housekeeper who had somehow acquired it. G, with his burn scars and mysterious connection to Martha, Linda's thinly veiled hostility, he started the engine, knowing Zoe was waiting, but he'd already made his decision. Whatever secrets the Robertson mansion held, he would uncover them, even if it meant stirring up ghosts he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. The Robertson mansion's library smelled of leather-bound books and the subtle perfume of old paper, a scent Jason had always loved. It was Friday afternoon, his 5th day on the job, and he'd finally found an opportunity to explore the room that had captured his curiosity since day one. The household staff was busy preparing for a dinner party, and Robert had taken Kenneth to a doctor's appointment. Most importantly, Linda was at her weekly spa appointment, giving Jason at least 2 hours of freedom. "If you need anything, I'll be overseeing the catering preparations," Jessica had told him earlier, her voice low as she passed him in the hallway. Something in her tone suggested she understood more than she let on. Now, alone in the vast library, Jason moved methodically along the shelves searching for what exactly, he wasn't sure. Family records, photographs, some explanation for why his mother's portrait hung in the grand hall of a mansion owned by people who should have been strangers. The library was 2 stories tall, with a wrought iron spiral staircase leading to a balcony that circled the room. Leather chairs sat in strategic locations, inviting quiet contemplation. One wall was dominated by a massive stone fireplace with an intricately carved wooden mantel. Jason ran his fingers along the mantel, admiring the craftsmanship while looking for anything unusual. As a woodworker, he knew that elaborate pieces like this often contained hidden compartments. His father had once told him that wealthy families of old New York frequently built secrets into their homes, hidden spaces for valuables, important documents, or sometimes just private correspondence that wouldn't survive public scrutiny. The mantel appeared solid, disappointingly ordinary despite its beauty. Stepping back, Jason surveyed the room again. If he were hiding something important, where would he put it? His eyes traveled to the paneling behind Kenneth's desk. The wood was different there, slightly darker, with a grain pattern that didn't quite match the surrounding panels. To most eyes, it would be imperceptible, but to Jason's trained perception, it stood out like a flash of neon. Moving to the wall, he pressed lightly on different sections of the panel. Feeling for any give, nothing. He examined the edges more carefully, noting a slight variation in the seam on the right side. Pulling a thin metal ruler from his toolbox, he slid it carefully into the gap and felt a subtle resistance. Then a click. The panel eased open an inch, heart pounding. Jason pulled it wider, revealing a shallow cavity about the size of a shoebox. Inside sat a leather-bound book, its surface worn with age and handling. Beside it was a small wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. He removed the book first, handling it carefully. Opening the cover, he found handwritten script on the first page. The private journal of Martha Sullivan, in service to the Robertson family. Martha, the former housekeeper who had apparently saved G and brought him to the mansion. The woman who, according to Jessica, had died 2 years ago. Jason flipped to a random page, dated May 15th, 1990. Mr. Kenneth seemed particularly melancholy today. It's Sarah's birthday. He would never admit it, but I saw him looking at the old photograph he keeps locked in his desk drawer. 32 years she would be now, with her boys not much younger than she was when he cast her out. His pride has cost him so much, yet he cannot bend. Men like Kenneth believe their wealth and position grant them dominion over fate itself, yet they are prisoners of their own making. Jason's hands trembled. Sarah, his mother's name, and her boys. Could that mean him and Greg? He turned back several pages, searching for more context. An entry from December 1987 caught his eye. Visited Sarah and Jack today. The twins are growing so fast. Curious little things. Always getting into mischief. Sarah asked if her father ever mentions her. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth. Mr. Kenneth speaks of her only when deep in his cups, and then only to lament his ungrateful daughter, who chose a gardener's son over her birthright. How can I tell her that her own father refers to her beautiful boys as the gardener's spawn? Yet the pain in his eyes betrays his words. The portrait I commissioned for Sarah and Jack's anniversary hangs in their modest living room, Sarah holding the infant twins in that beautiful black frame Jack crafted. Sometimes I think of the grand portraits in the Robertson Gallery and wonder if her sons will ever know their true heritage. Jason sank into the nearest chair, the journal clutched in his white-knuckled grip. The room seemed to spin around him as the implications crashed through his consciousness. Kenneth Robertson was Sarah Reynolds' father, which meant, "My God," Jason whispered. "He's my grandfather." The sound of approaching footsteps jolted him back to reality. Quickly, he returned the journal to its hiding place but kept the wooden box, slipping it into his tool bag. Just as the library door opened, Robert stood in the doorway, his expression darkening when he spotted Jason. "What are you doing in here?" Jason gestured to the ornate ceiling molding. "Just measuring for a similar restoration in the East Wing. The pattern is almost identical." Robert's eyes narrowed. "I thought I made it clear you were to stick to your assigned areas. My apologies. Jessica mentioned it was all right to check the molding details since they matched the East Wing." "Did she?" Robert's tone was ice. "Well, I'm telling you it's not. The library is private." "Understood, I was just leaving." As Jason gathered his tools, Robert's phone rang. He stepped into the hallway to answer it, his voice dropping to an urgent murmur. Taking advantage of the moment, Jason slipped the panel fully closed and moved toward the door as he passed Robert. He caught fragments of the conversation. "Don't care how you do it. Just make it look like..." Robert noticed Jason and immediately switched to a more professional tone. "Yes, as I was saying, the quarterly report should be on my desk by Monday. Thank you." Jason nodded politely and continued down the hallway, his mind reeling from what he'd discovered. If Kenneth Robertson was indeed Sarah's father, that meant the wealthy patriarch had disowned his own daughter, Jason's mother, and never acknowledged his grandsons. But why, and how did the portrait survive the fire that killed Sarah and Greg? Lost in thought, Jason almost collided with Jessica as she rounded a corner. "Mr. Reynolds, I was looking for you." Her eyes darted to Robert's retreating figure, then back to Jason. "Is everything all right?" "Fine. Just a misunderstanding about where I should be working." Jessica lowered her voice. "Be careful around Mr. Robert, he's protective of the family's privacy." "I noticed." Jason hesitated, then asked, "Jessica, did you know Martha Sullivan well?" Something flickered across her face. Caution, perhaps, or recognition. "She was my aunt, actually. She got me this position after she retired." "Your aunt?" This was an unexpected connection. "Did she ever mention a portrait? The black portrait?" Jessica's eyes widened slightly. "Not to me directly, but I overheard her once talking to G. Something about it being proof of birthright. I never understood what she meant." Before Jason could respond, a commotion erupted from the front of the house. Raised voices, then the sound of breaking glass. They hurried toward the noise, finding a scene of chaos in the entrance hall. Robert stood there, his face flushed with anger, pointing accusingly at Jason's open toolbox, which had apparently been moved from the east wing to the main hallway. A valuable-looking silver statuette lay beside it on the floor. "I caught him red-handed," Robert was telling a security guard. "This priceless Tiffany piece was in his tools. He's been stealing from us." Jason stared in disbelief. "That's impossible. I've never seen that statue before." "Search his bag," Robert commanded. The security guard looked uncomfortable, but reached for Jason's tool bag. "This is absurd," Jason protested, though his heart raced at the thought of Martha's box hidden inside. Before the guard could open the bag, G appeared silently in the doorway, tablet in hand. He approached Robert and showed him something on the screen. Robert's face paled as he watched whatever G was displaying. "Where did you get this?" G tapped the tablet again, apparently showing more. "Fine," Robert snapped, turning to the guard. False alarm. The statue must have fallen accidentally. The guard looked confused but stepped back. Robert gave Jason a venomous look before storming off, G following at a distance. "What just happened?" Jason asked Jessica when they were alone. She seemed as surprised as he was. "I have no idea, but G just saved you from serious trouble." She hesitated, then added, "He's never done anything like that before, for anyone." As Jessica returned to her duties, Jason retrieved his toolbox. Mind buzzing with questions, he needed to examine the box from Martha's hiding place, but not here, not now. The stakes had just been raised significantly. Robert had tried to frame him, and G, for reasons unknown, had intervened. That evening, as Jason drove home, the wooden box sat heavily in his bag. A tangible link to the past he was slowly uncovering. Behind him, unnoticed in the gathering dusk, a black town car pulled out from the curb and followed at a discreet distance. The kitchen table in Jason's modest Queens apartment was barely visible beneath the scattered contents of Martha's wooden box. After putting Zoe to bed with promises of pancakes in the morning, he had carefully emptied the container, arranging its contents chronologically as best he could. Old photographs, newspaper clippings, birthday cards signed, "Love, Martha, to my dear Sarah." And most revealing of all, several letters written in an elegant hand. Signed, "Your father, Kenneth." Jason held one such letter, dated June 1982. To the light, "Sarah, your mother's pearls are enclosed. I couldn't bear to see Linda wearing them, knowing they were meant for you on your wedding day. This is all I can offer. Do not contact me again. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. The gardener's boy may have your heart, but he will never provide the life you deserve. I've instructed the family lawyers to honor your request to remove your name from all Robertson documents. As far as society is concerned, you are no longer my daughter. Perhaps someday you'll understand that bloodlines and reputation are the only true currencies in this world." Your father, Kenneth Jason, set the letter down, a strange mixture of anger and grief washing over him. His mother, disowned for falling in love with his father, a gardener's son, apparently, stripped of her identity, her inheritance, her family name, all because Kenneth Robertson couldn't bear the scandal of his daughter marrying beneath her station. The next document was a birth announcement, carefully preserved in tissue paper. Sarah and Jack Reynolds joyfully announced the birth of their twin sons, Jason Michael and Gregory Thomas Reynolds, born April 10, 1987. A photograph accompanied it, the same image from the black portrait, but in this version, it was just a simple snapshot. His mother's tired but radiant smile, two newborns with matching hospital caps, his father's handwriting on the back, "Our family, complete at last." The portrait that now hung in the Robertson mansion must have been commissioned afterward, the formal version of this intimate moment. The timeline was coming together. Sarah Reynolds, born Sarah Robertson, had been Kenneth's daughter. She fell in love with Jack Reynolds, son of the family gardener. Against her father's wishes, Kenneth disowned her when she chose love over wealth and position. Martha, the housekeeper, had maintained secret contact, becoming the only bridge between Sarah and her past. But why would Martha take the portrait the night before the fire? And how did it survive when his mother and brother didn't? Jason flipped through more documents until he found letters dated around the time of the fire in 1995. Most were from Martha to Sarah, but one caught his eye. A hastily scribbled note on Robertson estate stationery. S. L knows about our visits. Not safe. Heard her on phone with Cousin F planning something. Stay alert. Will come tonight to discuss. ML had to be Linda. But who was F? And what were they planning that had Martha so concerned? The sound of light tapping made Jason jump. Someone was at his apartment door. A soft, almost hesitant knock that wouldn't wake Zoe. He quickly gathered the documents, returning them to the box and sliding it under the couch before approaching the door cautiously through the peephole. He saw Jessica. He saw the Robertson housekeeper, looking nervously over her shoulder at the empty hallway. He opened the door. "Jessica, how did you find where you live?" "G told me." She glanced down the hall again. "May I come in? Quickly, please." Jason stepped aside, allowing her into the apartment. Once inside, she seemed to relax marginally, though her eyes continued darting around as if expecting danger from any corner. "I'm sorry to intrude like this," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But after what happened today with Robert, and then seeing G follow you, I was worried. G followed me. He does that sometimes. Follows people in the town car. Usually on Mrs. Linda's orders, but tonight was different. He came back and went straight to his quarters without reporting to her." Jason considered this information. "Why are you here, Jessica?" She twisted her hands together. "My Aunt Martha raised me after my parents died. She was more mother than aunt to me. Before she died, she made me promise to watch over G and to help the sons when they returned. I never understood what she meant until I saw your reaction to the black portrait. Sons, Jason repeated. Plural. Jessica nodded. I think she meant you and someone else. Jason sank onto the couch. My twin brother, Greg, died in the fire with my mother, at least. That's what I was told. Are you certain of that? Jessica asked quietly, before Jason could respond. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Watch your back. Robert making calls. Digging into your background. Jason showed Jessica the message. Seems your aunt's protege is looking out for me. Why would he do that? Jessica stared at the text, her expression troubled. I don't know. G never communicates with anyone except through notes when absolutely necessary. He's never sent a text as far as I know. What happened to him? The scars. His inability to speak. Aunt Martha would only say he survived something terrible. He came to the mansion about 10 years ago after Martha retired. Kenneth took him in as a favor to her, though Linda was furious about it. Jason's mind was racing. Jessica, I need to see Martha's journal again. There are still too many missing pieces. It's too dangerous for you to go back to the library. Robert will be watching. Then you'll have to help me, Jason said. There must be more entries around the time of the fire. Martha knew something was going to happen. She warned my mother about Linda and someone called F. Jessica paled. Frank, Linda's cousin. You know him? Of him, he's done odd jobs for the family over the years, always paid in cash, never through official channels. Aunt Martha called him Linda's fixer. A chill ran down Jason's spine. What kind of jobs? I don't know specifics, but nothing good. He disappeared from the picture years ago, at least until recently. I saw him meeting with Linda in the garden 2 days ago. Jason absorbed this with growing unease. If Linda's fixer was back on the scene just as Jason was uncovering family secrets, that couldn't be coincidence. Listen, Jessica said urgently. I need to get back before I'm missed. But there's something else you should know. Kenneth is very ill. Worse than the family has let on. He's been meeting with his lawyers frequently, and Linda is panicking about something. I've overheard arguments about the will. He's changing it. I think so. And there's more. The night before last, I heard him talking to G. He called him Gregory. Jason's blood ran cold. You think G is... A soft creak from the hallway interrupted him. They both turned to see Zoe standing there in her dinosaur pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, who's talking? Just a friend from work, sweetheart. Go back to bed. Zoe studied Jessica with sleepy curiosity before padding back to her room. Seemingly satisfied, Jessica rose to leave. I should go. Be careful, Jason. If Robert is investigating you, it won't take much to connect you to Sarah Reynolds. Once Linda knows who you really are, what would she do? Jessica's expression was grim. Linda has spent 30 years as Mrs. Kenneth Robertson. She's not about to let long-lost grandchildren threaten her position or her inheritance. She reached for the door, then hesitated. There's a safe in Kenneth's study, behind the painting of the sailboat. If there's proof of your connection to the family, it might be there. After Jessica left, Jason sat in the darkened living room, turning over everything he'd learned. If G was indeed Gregory, his twin brother, somehow rescued from the fire, why wouldn't he reveal himself? And if Kenneth was changing his will, possibly to include newly discovered grandchildren, how far would Linda go to protect her claim to the Robertson fortune? As if in answer, his phone buzzed again. Old man asking questions about you, said your name in his sleep. Linda heard, be ready. G outside, across the street. A black sedan's engine started. Jason moved to the window just in time to see it pull away, its taillights disappearing into the night. Can I come with you today? Dad, please. Zoe bounced on her toes beside the kitchen counter, her backpack already strapped on despite it being Saturday. Mrs. Kelly is nice, but she smells like cough drops and her TV only gets boring channels. Jason flipped the last pancake onto a plate, buying time to consider his daughter's request. Taking Zoe to the Robertson mansion seemed risky, given the increasingly complicated situation. Yet leaving her with Mrs. Kelly, while unknown threats potentially circled, felt equally concerning. The place I'm working is pretty fancy, he hedged. Not really kid-friendly. I'll be super good, Zoe promised, her eyes wide with sincerity. I brought my sketch pad and library book. I won't touch anything expensive. Jason studied his daughter's hopeful face, with her dark eyes and determined expression. She looked so much like Sarah that it sometimes took his breath away. "All right," he relented. "But you stay where I can see you." "Okay." Zoe's triumphant grin made him smile despite his worries. An hour later, they pulled up to the Robertson mansion. Jason had texted Jessica about bringing Zoe, and she'd arranged for them to enter through the service entrance to avoid Linda, who was hosting a charity committee meeting in the main part of the house. "Whoa," Zoe whispered as they stepped inside. "It's like a castle." Jessica met them in the rear hallway, her smile warming as she greeted Zoe. "I've set up a little spot for you in the conservatory. It has the most beautiful light for drawing." As they followed Jessica through the back corridors, Jason kept Zoe close, acutely aware of every shadow and sound. The mansion felt different today, more menacing, as if the walls themselves were watching their movements. The conservatory was a pleasant surprise. A sun-filled room with tall windows overlooking a private garden. Potted palms and flowering plants created a peaceful atmosphere, and a small table had been prepared with drawing supplies and a plate of cookies. "This is perfect," Jason told Jessica. "Thank you. Mr. Kenneth rarely comes here, and Mrs. Linda avoids it entirely. Something about the humidity affecting her hair." Jessica smiled conspiratorially. "You should be undisturbed." Once Zoe was settled with her sketch pad, Jason lowered his voice. "Any news about the journal?" "I couldn't access the library, but..." Jessica discreetly passed him a folded paper. "I copied some entries from memory, dates around the fire." Jason pocketed it with a grateful nod. "And Kenneth, doctor's visit this morning, he's not doing well." She hesitated. "He's been asking about the black portrait. Wanted it moved to his bedroom." A soft knock at the conservatory door interrupted them. G stood in the doorway, his scarred face partially hidden by the shadows. His eyes moved from Jason to Zoe, widening slightly. "G," Jessica acknowledged. "This is Zoe, Mr. Reynolds' daughter." Zoe looked up, her initial surprise at G's appearance quickly replaced by curiosity. "Hi, I like your suit. You look like you drive important people around." G inclined his head in a small bow that made Zoe giggle. He pulled out his notepad and wrote something, showing it to her. "I like your drawing," Zoe read aloud. "Thanks, it's our apartment. But with a tower added, Dad says real apartments don't have towers, but I think they should." G's lips curved in what might have been a smile. He wrote again. "Every home should have a tower," Zoe read, beaming. "See, Dad? He gets it." Jason watched the exchange with a strange tightness in his chest. There was something about the way G looked at Zoe, a profound tenderness that seemed almost familial. "G," Jessica said softly, "is Mr. Kenneth back from his appointment?" G nodded, then wrote a longer note which he handed to Jason. "Kenneth asking for you. Says he recognizes your craftsmanship. Private meeting requested." Linda furious. "Be careful." Jason shared a concerned glance with Jessica. "When?" "Now. I'll take you. Jessica will watch girl. I need to go with G for a bit," Jason told Zoe. "Job stuff. Will you be okay with Jessica?" "Duh, Dad. We're going to have cookies and talk about towers." Jason followed G through a series of back corridors and up a narrow service staircase. The contrast between these plain passages and the opulent main areas of the mansion was striking, a physical representation of the division between the Robertson family and those who served them. G stopped before an imposing mahogany door on the second floor, gesturing for Jason to wait. He knocked softly before entering, leaving Jason alone in the hallway. In those quiet moments, Jason studied the wood grain of the door, running his fingers over the carved details. His father had taught him that wood holds memories, that the rings record seasons of plenty and scarcity, that knots mark traumas overcome, that even after cutting, sanding and finishing, the core essence remains. The door opened, and G beckoned him inside. Kenneth Robertson's bedroom was elegant but austere, more like a high-end hotel suite than a personal space. The curtains were partially drawn, casting the room in a gentle half-light. And there, propped on a special easel beside the massive four-poster bed, was the black portrait. Kenneth himself sat in a wingback chair near the window, a blanket covering his legs despite the room's warmth. At 85, he retained an impressive bearing, his silver hair carefully combed, his posture rigid even in obvious illness. Yet the hands that rested on the blanket's edge trembled slightly. betraying the weakness his pride sought to hide. "Mr. Reynolds." Kenneth's voice was stronger than his appearance suggested. "Thank you for coming, G. You may leave us." G hesitated, looking between Kenneth and Jason before reluctantly withdrawing. "You've done remarkable work on the East Wing doors," Kenneth said once they were alone. "I recognized the craftsmanship immediately. You have a rare talent. Restoration is not merely skill, but intuition, the ability to see what once was and bring it forth again." "Thank you, sir." Kenneth's piercing blue eyes, the same shade as Jason's mother's, studied him intently. "You remind me of someone. A young man who once worked on these grounds, Jack Reynolds. Any relation?" Jason's heart hammered against his ribs. "My father." "Ah." Kenneth's expression revealed nothing. He was talented as well. Different medium, gardening rather than woodwork, but the same understanding of living things. "You knew him well." "Well enough." Kenneth gestured to a nearby chair. "Please sit. Tell me, what do you think of that portrait?" Jason sat, eyes moving to the black portrait. "It's meaningful. Indeed a family piece, though not originally a Robertson heirloom. Martha brought it into the household some years ago, said it deserved proper preservation. It's been well maintained," Jason offered carefully. Kenneth's gaze hadn't left Jason's face. "The woman in the portrait, she has remarkable eyes, don't you think?" "Yes, the same shade as yours." The statement hung in the air between them, neither question nor accusation, merely observation. "Sir," Jason began, uncertain how to proceed. Kenneth raised a trembling hand. "I'm an old man, Mr. Reynolds, old and unwell. Time has a way of clarifying perspective. Pride and propriety once seemed worth any sacrifice now." He glanced toward the portrait. "Now I find myself questioning the wisdom of choices made long ago." Jason followed his gaze to the image of Sarah, his mother, Kenneth's daughter, holding her infant sons. "Sometimes the most important things are the easiest to lose," he said quietly. Kenneth's eyes sharpened. "You sound like her." He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly. "I have recently been reviewing my affairs, making certain adjustments to ensure all obligations are properly addressed." "I understand. Do you?" Kenneth leaned forward. "I'm not certain you do. There are forces in this house that resist change, Mr. Reynolds. Forces that have invested decades in maintaining a particular order." "Mrs. Robertson," Jason said, no longer bothering with pretense. "My wife has been a competent steward of the Robertson name," Kenneth said carefully. "But blood is blood, Mr. Reynolds, and in the end, that is what remains." Before Jason could respond, the bedroom door opened. Linda stood in the doorway, her expression glacial as she took in the scene before her. "Kenneth, darling, you should be resting." Her voice was honey over ice. "Mr. Reynolds? I'm sure you have duties elsewhere." Kenneth straightened in his chair. "Mr. Reynolds is here at my request, Linda." "Of course, dear. But Dr. Mercer was quite clear about limiting visitors." She moved to Kenneth's side, placing a proprietary hand on his shoulder. "Particularly during your medication times." Jason rose. Recognizing the dismissal, "Thank you for your time, Mr. Robertson." As he moved toward the door, Kenneth called after him. "Mr. Reynolds, I'd appreciate it if you'd look at the library paneling next week. I believe some of the original details warrant your attention." "I'd be happy to, sir." Linda's fingers tightened visibly on Kenneth's shoulder. "I'll have Jessica show you out." In the hallway, Jason found G waiting, his expression inscrutable. Jason followed him back toward the service stairs in silence, mind racing with the implications of Kenneth's words. The old man knew, or at least suspected, who Jason was, and he was changing his will. No wonder Linda was panicking. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, G suddenly gripped Jason's arm, pulling him to a stop. He pointed to his ear, then toward the nearby morning room, where voices were audible through the partially open door. "Don't care how you do it, Frank," Linda was saying. Her voice tense. "This needs to be handled immediately. He's asking too many questions, getting too close." "Like mother, like son," a man's voice, presumably Frank, replied with a chuckle. "Don't worry, Linda. I took care of the problem 30 years ago, didn't I? Some problems just need a little fire to solve them." G's grip on Jason's arm tightened painfully, his scarred face a mask of barely contained rage. Jason placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. feeling the tremors running through the other man's body. In that moment, with Linda's words hanging in the air between them, Jason knew with absolute certainty GE was Gregory, his brother, the twin who hadn't died in the fire after all. And the people who had set that fire were now planning something equally devastating to protect their claim on the Robertson fortune. The garden behind the Robertson mansion offered the only privacy Jason could find that afternoon. After overhearing Linda's conversation with Frank, he had hurried back to the conservatory. Relieved to find Zoe happily engaged in a drawing competition with Jessica, G had disappeared, his rigid posture and shaking hands suggesting he needed space to process what they'd heard. Now, as evening approached, Jason sat on a stone bench partially hidden by overgrown hedges, unfolding the paper Jessica had given him. The copied journal entries were written in her neat handwriting. April 12, 1995. Linda confronted me today about my unauthorized excursions. She knows I've been visiting Sarah and the boys. I denied everything, but she wasn't fooled. Your loyalty should be to this family, she said, as if Sarah and her sons aren't Robertson blood. I fear what she might do. Kenneth remains oblivious, locked in his study with his regrets and his bourbon. April 14, 1995. Overheard Linda on the phone with Frank. Something about electrical problems, and unfortunate accidents happen all the time. I must warn Sarah. We'll visit tonight and take the portrait for restoration. The excuse I've prepared. The boys turn 8 tomorrow. I've hidden presents in my bag. April 15th, 1995. God forgive me. The fire. It happened so fast. I had just left with the portrait when I heard the explosion. Turned back but could only reach Gregory, unconscious near a window. Sarah was still inside, calling for Jason. Jack was fighting the flames, trying to reach them. I had to choose. Get Gregory to safety or go back for the others. The boy was so badly burned. His screams still haunt me. When the fire trucks came, I slipped away with him. I couldn't risk Linda discovering he survived. My sister in Maine will keep him safe until I can arrange something more permanent. I pray Jason and Jack made it out, but there's been no word yet. May 30, 1995. Finally news of Jack and Jason. Both survived, though Jack is lost to drink now. The authorities have placed Jason in foster care. I've arranged for quiet financial support through a lawyer friend. Gregory asked for his brother constantly, but the trauma has stolen his voice. Doctor says the vocal cord damage may be permanent. The burns are healing, but slowly, he'll carry these scars forever. When he's stronger, I'll tell him everything. About Kenneth, about his heritage, about Linda's betrayal. For now, I let him believe his family is all gone. It's safer that way. Jason folded the paper with trembling hands. The final confirmation of what he'd already begun to suspect. The fire that killed his mother hadn't been an accident. Linda and her cousin Frank had engineered it to sever any connection between Kenneth and Sarah's family, and Gregory, had survived. Rescued by Martha, who raised him in secret to protect him from Linda, a shadow fell across the bench. Jason looked up to find Robert standing over him, his expression unreadable. Planning to spend the night in our garden, Reynolds? Jason stood, tensing for confrontation. Just taking a break before finishing up. A break that involves reading mysterious notes. Robert's eyes flicked to the folded paper in Jason's hand. Work calculations, Jason lied, for the materials I need to order. Robert studied him with a coldness that reminded Jason of Linda. You've been spending a lot of time with my father recently. Mr. Robertson has been interested in the restoration work. Has he? Robert's tone sharpened. Funny. He's never shown much interest in household maintenance before. Then again, he's become rather sentimental lately. Age does that, I suppose. Jason remained silent, unwilling to be drawn into whatever game Robert was playing. My mother thinks you're after something, Robert continued, circling Jason slowly. Money, perhaps. A sob story for the old man, hoping for a handout. I'm just doing the job I was hired to do. Are you? Robert stopped directly in front of him. Because it seems to me you've been doing quite a bit more than restoring woodwork, exploring private areas of the house, meeting secretly with staff, examining family heirlooms with unusual interest. Jason held his ground. If you're unhappy with my work, I can leave the project unfinished. That won't be necessary. Robert's smile didn't reach his eyes. In fact, I think it's important you complete your work here. Every last detail. The threat in his words was unmistakable. "My daughter is waiting for me," Jason said, stepping around Robert. Yes, your daughter, Zoe, isn't it? Charming child. It would be terrible if anything happened to disrupt her stable little life. Children need security, don't they? A reliable home, a dependable parent." Jason stopped, turning slowly. "Are you threatening my daughter?" Robert's expression remained pleasant. "Simply making an observation about the vulnerability of single-parent households. Social services can be so interventionist these days." Before Jason could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the tension. Jessica appeared around the hedge. "Mr. Reynolds, your daughter is asking for you. And Mr. Robert, your mother is looking for you. Something about the charity auction tomorrow." Robert's mask slipped back into place. "Of course, we'll continue our chat another time, Reynolds," as Robert walked away. Jessica placed a warning hand on Jason's arm. "Not here," she whispered. "The garden has cameras." They collected Zoe and made their way to the East Wing, where Jason's restoration work provided a legitimate reason for their presence. Once there, Jessica closed the door firmly behind them. "What happened with Kenneth?" she asked urgently. "He knows who I am," Jason replied, keeping his voice low while Zoe explored the partially restored room. "Or at least he suspects. He's changing his will. And Linda knows it. That explains the emergency calls to the family lawyer this morning." Jessica glanced nervously at the door. "And Robert? Just threatened Zoe and me, although in the most polite terms possible." Jessica's face paled. "You need to be careful. Robert may seem less dangerous than Linda, but he's just as ruthless. He's been groomed his entire life to protect the Robertson fortune." "I found out about the fire," Jason said, pulling out the journal pages. "Linda and Frank engineered it to kill my mother and sever any claim we might have on the Robertson name. And G is Gregory, my brother. Martha saved him from the fire." Jessica nodded slowly. "I suspected as much, but G never confirmed it. He keeps his past locked away as tightly as he keeps his voice. Why wouldn't he tell me? All these years, I thought he was dead. Fear, perhaps, or protection. Martha always said the less people knew, the safer everyone would be." Jessica glanced at her watch. "I need to get back before I'm missed. What will you do now?" "I need to speak with G, with Gregory, and I need to find proof of what Linda and Frank did. Martha's journal entries wouldn't stand up in court. There may be something in Kenneth's safe," Jessica suggested, "the one behind the sailboat painting in his study. I'll need a distraction to access it, and the combination. Leave that to me, tomorrow night. Linda's charity auction will empty the house of most staff. I'll create a reason for you to return." She hesitated. "Jason, if you find proof, what then?" "Justice for my mother, and protection for what's left of my family." He looked over at Zoe, who was carefully examining the ornate doorframe he'd been restoring, "including my daughter," after Jessica left. Jason knelt beside Zoe, helping her trace the intricate carvings with her small fingers. "Dad," she said thoughtfully, "why does that man G look at you so funny? Like he knows you from somewhere?" Jason's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, sweetheart? When he thinks you're not looking, he watches you like..." She frowned, searching for the right words. "Like in that movie where the soldier comes home and sees his family again, out of the mouths of babes. Maybe he reminds me of someone too." Zoe nodded sagely. "His eyes look like yours. Same color." "You noticed that, huh?" "I notice lots of things." She looked up at him with her mother's earnest expression. "Is he your friend?" Jason thought about the brother he'd believed dead for 30 years. The twin who'd survived fire and trauma, who'd been watching over him from the shadows. "I hope so, Zoe. I really hope so." Later that night, after tucking Zoe into bed, Jason found a small package outside his apartment door. Inside was a silver USB drive and a handwritten note in G's distinctive, slightly shaky script. Security camera footage from 1995. Martha kept everything. Watch alone. Some ghosts should stay buried until right time. Not safe for Zoe to know yet. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., main gate. Linda and Robert at auction. Kenneth in study. Your chance for truth. G. Greg. For the first time, his brother had signed his real name. The security footage was grainy and time-stamped. April 14th, 1995. The night before the fire, Jason watched it for the third time on his laptop, the blue light illuminating his face in the darkened living room. The video showed the rear entrance of the Robertson mansion. Martha emerged carrying a large package wrapped in cloth, undoubtedly the Black portrait. She looked nervously over her shoulder before hurrying to her car. As she pulled away, another figure appeared at the edge of the frame, Linda, watching Martha's departure with a phone pressed to her ear. The next clip jumped to April 15th, early morning. A different camera angle showed Martha's car returning to the mansion. But this time, she wasn't alone. In her arms was a small, limp form, a child, wrapped in what looked like a singed blanket. The boy's face was turned away, but Jason knew with bone-deep certainty he was looking at his brother Gregory, rescued from the flames that had claimed their mother. Martha hurried inside through a service entrance, never appearing on the mansion cameras again that day. The footage ended there, leaving Jason with more questions than answers. Why had Martha taken the portrait the night before the fire? Had she sensed danger coming? And if she suspected Linda was planning something terrible, why hadn't she warned Sarah and Jack more explicitly? The answer came to him with sudden clarity. She had warned them. The journal entry mentioned her plan to visit that night. But she had only intended to remove the portrait for restoration, as a cover story. While she spoke to them about her suspicions, she couldn't have known the fire would happen so soon after her visit. The sound of Mrs. Kelly arriving to watch Zoe pulled Jason from his thoughts. He had told her he needed to handle an emergency work situation, not entirely a lie. Tonight, he would finally get answers. The Robertson mansion was eerily quiet as Jason approached the rear garden gate at precisely 8 p.m. The charity auction had emptied the house of staff and family, save for Kenneth and his nurse. The evening shadows stretched across the manicured lawn, and somewhere in the distance, a police siren wailed, a discordant note in the prestigious neighborhood. Gregory stood waiting, his scarred face partially hidden in the gathering darkness. When he spotted Jason, he unlocked the gate without a word. They walked in silence through the garden, two brothers separated by 30 years of false history. Now moving in perfect synchronization, their footsteps matched pace instinctively, a physical echo of their shared DNA. Gregory led him not to the main house but to a small guest cottage at the far end of the property. Once inside, he flipped on a single lamp and handed Jason a folded note. "We can talk here. No cameras, no listening devices." Martha made sure of it. "Gregory," Jason said, the name feeling strange on his tongue. Gregory's face twitched at the sound of his full name. He wrote quickly, "Most know me as G now. Gregory died in that fire. But you didn't die, Martha saved you." Gregory nodded slowly, then wrote again, his hand trembling slightly. "I remember the heat, the smoke, couldn't breathe, couldn't find you. Mom was calling for us. Then darkness. Woke up with Martha in Maine, bandages everywhere. No voice." Jason sank into a chair, the weight of the past 3 decades pressing down on him. "All this time I thought you were dead. Dad thought you were dead. He never recovered. Drank himself to death when I was 15. Gregory's expression crumpled. He wrote again. "Martha told me he died when I was 10. Said you were in good foster home. Safer if everyone thought I died too. Linda would have finished the job if she knew. Why come back to the mansion? Why work for them?" Gregory's writing became more urgent. Martha got sick before she died. Told Kenneth everything. About Sarah being pregnant. About the twins. About the fire. Kenneth brought me here as driver. His penance. Linda doesn't know who I am. Just the charity case with burn scars that Martha begged Kenneth to help. But why didn't you find me once you were here? Let me know you were alive. Too dangerous. Linda watching. Robert watching. Martha said wait for right moment. Then you appeared, working on doors. Like universe bringing us back together. Jason ran a hand through his hair, emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Jesus, Greg. 30 years. We lost 30 years. Gregory placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. The first physical contact between the twins since they were children. His scarred fingers gripped tightly, as if afraid Jason might disappear if he let go. "Kenneth knows who you are?" Jason asked. Gregory nodded, writing. "Figured it out last year. Started changing will." Linda panicked, called Frank back. "The same Frank who set the fire that killed our mother." Gregory's eyes blazed with a fury that needed no words. He wrote a single word: revenge. Jason nodded slowly. But we need proof. Something that will stand up in court. Gregory moved to a small desk in the corner, unlocking the bottom drawer with a key from his pocket. He withdrew a metal box and placed it on the table between them. Inside were more of Martha's journals, photographs, and a small tape recorder with several cassettes labeled with dates. Martha recorded conversations, Jason asked. Surprised? Gregory nodded, selecting a tape labeled April 12th, 1995, and inserting it into the recorder. He pressed play. A woman's voice, presumably Linda's, though younger, filled the room. Becoming a problem, Frank. Martha's been visiting them regularly, if Kenneth ever found out Sarah has twin boys. A man's gruff voice replied. So, the old man disowned her, right? Not like they have a legal claim. Don't be stupid. Kenneth's getting sentimental in his old age. Last week I caught him looking at Sarah's childhood photos. If he reunites with her, if he meets those boys, everything we've worked for is at risk. I need this problem eliminated. What exactly are you asking, Linda? You know people who can make accidents happen. Electrical fires are common in older buildings. A pause, then. This is different than our usual arrangements. Linda, we're talking about your stepdaughter, children. She's not my anything. She's the mistake Kenneth made with his first wife. A mistake that needs to be permanently erased before it costs us millions. The recording ended. Jason sat frozen, the evidence of Linda's murderous plot hanging in the air between them. This is it, he whispered. Proof that she orchestrated the fire. Gregory nodded grimly, writing, more tapes, more evidence. Been collecting for years, waiting for right time. Why wait? Why not take this to the police immediately? Kenneth dying, cancer. Doctors give weeks. Newell names us both. You, me, Zoe. Need to protect him until it's official. Jason absorbed this information slowly. Linda and Robert know about the will. Know something changing, lawyer visits. Kenneth asking about you. Not sure they suspect me yet. A sudden knock at the cottage door made them both jump. Gregory motioned for Jason to stay silent as he approached the door cautiously. He opened it to reveal Jessica, her face flushed with urgency. You need to come quickly, she gasped. Kenneth's collapsed. He's asking for both of you. Gregory and Jason exchanged alarmed glances before rushing from the cottage, following Jessica across the dark garden toward the main house. The night air felt electric with tension as they hurried through the kitchen entrance and up the service stairs. Kenneth's bedroom door stood open, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. The old man lay in his massive bed, his skin alarmingly gray, his breathing labored. A nurse stood nearby, administering oxygen through a nasal cannula. When Kenneth saw them enter together, something like peace washed over his features. He beckoned them closer with a trembling hand. My boys, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah's boys at last. Jason felt Gregory stiffen beside him, emotions radiating from his scarred form like heat. They approached the bed together, moving in that same unconscious synchronicity. Mr. Robertson, Jason began. Grandfather, Kenneth corrected, each word clearly costing him effort. Should have acknowledged you. Long ago pride. Such a destructive force. Gregory reached out hesitantly, taking Kenneth's frail hand in his own. The old man's eyes filled with tears. Gregory, my quiet warrior. Watching over us all these years? He turned to Jason. And Jason, so like your mother. Her strength, her talent. Sir, grandfather, Jason said, the word strange on his tongue. You need to rest. We can talk when you're stronger. Kenneth shook his head weakly. No more time for waiting. Papers signed. New will filed. But Linda, dangerous when cornered. As if summoned by her name, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Linda's voice, shrill with fury, carried through the open door. What do you mean I'm not allowed in? He's my husband. The nurse moved quickly to the door, closing it firmly and turning the lock. Mr. Robertson's orders, she explained. No visitors except those specifically named. Kenneth's eyes locked with Jason's. The safe, he whispered. Behind the sailboat. Everything you need. To protect yourselves. Gregory squeezed his grandfather's hand, tears tracking silently down his scarred cheeks. For the first time in 30 years, he tried to speak, his damaged vocal cords straining to form a single word, the thank you. The sound, raspy and broken as it was, seemed to fill Kenneth with a final surge of strength. He gripped both their hands. Find the truth, all of it. Make this family what it should have been. Outside, Linda's demands grew more insistent. The door handle rattled violently. Time was running out. The nurse can't keep us out forever. Linda's voice pierced through the door. Robert, call Dr. Mercer immediately. Tell him Kenneth is being isolated from family during a medical emergency. Gregory gestured urgently toward the adjoining study. Jessica nodded, understanding instantly. The safe, she whispered. I'll try to buy you time. As Jessica approached the door, Gregory and Jason slipped into Kenneth's private study, quietly closing the connecting door behind them. The room was a testament to old money. Leather-bound books, hand-knotted Persian rugs, and furniture that had probably been commissioned specifically for the space generations ago. Jason quickly located the painting of the sailboat, a moody seascape that seemed at odds with the rest of the decor. As he carefully removed it from the wall, Gregory handed him a slip of paper with a sequence of numbers. Ed 4-1087, their birthday. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing several document folders, a velvet jewelry box, and a thick manila envelope labeled Contingencies in Kenneth's elegant handwriting. This must be it, Jason murmured, reaching for the envelope. The sound of the bedroom door finally opening halted their movements. Linda's voice carried clearly through the thin wall. Kenneth, darling, what's this nonsense about restricted visitors? I came as soon as I heard you were unwell. Kenneth's reply was too weak to hear, but Linda's response was sharp. Who's been in here? That nurse has no authority to... Mrs. Robertson, the nurse interjected firmly. Mr. Robertson explicitly requested limited visitation. His condition is fragile and excitement could worsen. I know my husband's condition better than anyone, Linda snapped. Where is Jessica? And where is that driver? They were seen entering this room. Jason and Gregory exchanged alarmed glances. Gregory scribbled hastily. Window now. They grabbed the envelope and quietly unlatched the study window, which thankfully opened onto a narrow balcony. As they slipped outside, Robert's voice joined the confrontation in the bedroom. Mother, perhaps we should respect Father's wishes for now. The doctor is on his way. Don't be naive. Robert, something is happening, and I intend to find out what. The balcony offered no obvious escape route. Gregory pointed to a nearby oak tree, its sturdy branches extending close to the balcony railing. Jason tucked the envelope securely inside his jacket and followed his brother's lead, climbing over the railing and leaping for the nearest branch. Years of construction work had kept Jason strong, but Gregory moved with surprising agility, suggesting his chauffeur duties hadn't been his only physical activity. They descended the tree quickly, dropping the last few feet to the ground, just as lights flicked on in Kenneth's study. Crouching low, they ran across the darkened lawn toward the guest cottage. Inside, Jessica was already waiting, her face tense with worry. They've called security to search the grounds, she said breathlessly. We don't have much time. Jason opened the manila envelope, spreading its contents across the small table. Inside were legal documents, old photographs, letters, and a sealed envelope addressed to my grandsons, in Kenneth's handwriting. Gregory broke the seal, his hands trembling slightly. They read together. Jason and Gregory, if you're reading this, circumstances have forced my hand before I could make proper amends in person. I've lived 3 decades with the knowledge that my pride cost me my daughter and nearly cost me my grandsons. When Martha revealed the truth about the fire and Gregory's survival, I believed I could correct my mistakes gradually, carefully. I was wrong. The documents enclosed provide everything you need. Proof of your parentage, evidence of Linda's crimes, and the provisions I've made for your future security. My lawyers have been instructed to execute the new will immediately upon my death. Linda and Robert will fight it. Of course, the recordings Martha kept all these years will be your shield. There is one thing you should know that even Martha never discovered. Linda's hold over Robert goes beyond maternal influence. Robert is not my son. He is the son of Frank Miller, Linda's cousin and co-conspirator. DNA tests confirmed my suspicions years ago. I kept this knowledge private to spare him pain, too. As Robert himself is unaware of his true parentage, I cannot undo the past. but I hope this truth brings you some measure of justice. Sarah deserved better from her father. You deserved better from your grandfather. With deepest regret and love, Kenneth Robertson." "Jesus," Jason whispered, the revelation hitting him like a physical blow. "Robert is Frank's son," Jessica gasped. "That explains why Linda has always been so protective of him. Beyond normal maternal instinct, she's been guarding a secret that could destroy her position in society." Gregory was rifling through the other documents, pulling out what appeared to be bank statements. He showed them to Jason, pointing to regular payments to offshore accounts dating back 30 years, coinciding perfectly with the time of the fire. Payoffs, Jason realized. Kenneth kept records of Linda's suspicious financial activities. But why wouldn't he confront her? Jessica asked. If he suspected her involvement in Sarah's death, because he shared the guilt, Jason said quietly. He disowned his daughter, drove her away. In his mind, he set the stage for the tragedy. The sound of approaching voices broke their concentration. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness outside, sweeping across the cottage windows. "Security," Jessica whispered. "We need to leave now." Gregory quickly gathered the documents. Stuffing them back into the envelope, he scribbled a hasty note. Back exit, through woods, car waiting. They slipped out through the rear door of the cottage just as security reached the front entrance. Gregory led them through a dense patch of trees at the property's edge, eventually emerging onto a quiet side street where his town car sat waiting. "Smart thinking," Jason said as they climbed in. "But where can we go? They'll report the car missing." Gregory held up his keys, pointing to a keychain with "personal" engraved on it. "This is your own car, not the family's," Jessica realized. "They won't know to look for it." Gregory nodded. Starting the engine and pulling smoothly away from the curb, they drove in tense silence, Jessica occasionally checking behind them for any signs of pursuit. "We need somewhere safe to examine these documents properly," Jason said. "Somewhere Linda wouldn't think to look." Jessica hesitated. "I might know a place. My cousin owns a small bed and breakfast in Connecticut. It's off-season, so it's mostly empty. We could have privacy there." Gregory nodded his approval, adjusting their route accordingly. As they drove, Jason's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Kelly. "Everything okay? Zoe's asleep but asking for you earlier." A wave of guilt washed over him. In the intensity of the night's revelations, he'd almost forgotten his daughter. "I need to get Zoe," he said. "I can't leave her behind, not with Linda and Frank knowing who I am." Gregory's expression darkened at the mention of Frank. He nodded grimly and changed direction toward Jason's apartment. They arrived to find Mrs. Kelly dozing on the couch, a romance novel fallen open on her chest. Jason quickly packed a bag for Zoe while Jessica explained a sanitized version of the situation to the confused babysitter. "Family emergency," she said smoothly. "Jason's uncle is very ill, and they need to travel immediately," as Jason gently carried his sleeping daughter to the car. A black SUV with tinted windows turned slowly onto their street. Gregory tapped the horn twice, a warning, and Jason quickened his pace, sliding into the back seat with Zoe still asleep in his arms. They pulled away, just as the SUV accelerated toward them. Gregory navigated through side streets with practiced precision, eventually losing their pursuer in a maze of one-way roads. How did they find us so quickly? Jessica wondered. Jason's blood ran cold as realization dawned. My phone, they must have tracked it. He powered off the device immediately, but the damage was done. Their safety margin had disappeared. As they crossed the bridge leaving Manhattan behind, Zoe stirred in Jason's arms. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "Where are we going?" "On a little adventure, sweetheart," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "With some family you haven't met yet." Her drowsy eyes drifted to Gregory in the driver's seat, focusing on his reflection in the rearview mirror. "Is that why the quiet man with the special face is coming with us? Because he's family too?" Jason exchanged a glance with Gregory, whose eyes glistened with unexpected emotion in the mirror. "Yes, Zoe," Jason said softly. "He's family, the closest family we have." Gregory's scarred hands tightened on the steering wheel as they drove into the darkness, leaving behind the glittering Manhattan skyline and heading toward an uncertain future, but facing it, at last, together. 3 days at Jessica's cousin's bed and breakfast had given them time to organize Kenneth's evidence and formulate a plan. the quaint Connecticut establishment, with its flowered wallpaper and creaking floors, had become an impromptu war room. Documents covered the dining table, while Martha's cassette recordings played on an old tape player borrowed from the owner. For Zoe, it had been an unexpected adventure, complete with a new uncle who taught her to communicate through notes and gestures. She had taken to Gregory immediately, seemingly unbothered by his scars or silence. Her innocence was the one bright spot in an otherwise tense situation. "Kenneth's condition is stable but critical," Jessica reported, hanging up the landline phone. "The nurse says Linda hasn't left his side since that night, watching to make sure he doesn't speak to anyone else," Jason said grimly, sorting through financial records. "Any word from the lawyers? They've confirmed the new will was properly filed, but they can't execute it until..." Jessica trailed off, glancing at Zoe, who was teaching Gregory how to make origami frogs at a small side table. "Until he's gone," Jason finished quietly. The phone rang again. Jessica answered, her expression changing from caution to shock. "It's Robert," she whispered, covering the receiver. "He wants to speak with you." Jason exchanged a surprised look with Gregory before taking the phone. "This is Jason Reynolds." Robert's voice was clipped, tense. "We need to talk, in person." "I don't think that's a good idea. It's about my mother and Frank. I found something you need to see." A pause. I'm not who you think I am." Jason's eyes drifted to Kenneth's letter, still open on the table. "I think I know exactly who you are." "Robert." Silence stretched across the line before Robert spoke again, his voice notably less composed. "Then you understand why we need to meet. Neutral ground, public place, your choice." After arranging a meeting at a busy Manhattan restaurant for that evening, Jason hung up, turning to find Gregory watching him intently. "Robert wants to meet," he explained. "Says he found something about Linda and Frank." Gregory scribbled quickly. "Trap. Maybe, but he sounded different, almost desperate." Jessica frowned. "Kenneth's letter mentioned Robert doesn't know about his real father if he's discovered the truth. It could change everything," Jason finished. "Or it could be Linda using him as bait." Gregory wrote again. "I'll go with you. Watch from distance. And I'll stay with Zoe," Jessica added. "But be careful. Linda's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." The restaurant Jason had chosen was upscale enough to ensure civility, but public enough to discourage any extreme measures. He arrived early, selecting a table with a clear view of both entrances. Gregory positioned himself at the bar, his scarred profile partially hidden by strategic lighting. Robert arrived precisely on time, alone and visibly agitated. His normally immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of strain. Slightly rumpled shirt cuffs, hair not perfectly in place. He slid into the seat across from Jason without greeting. "You have Kenneth's evidence," he stated flatly. "I need to see it." "Why would I show you anything?" Robert's composed facade cracked slightly. "Because I found these." He placed a small envelope on the table. "Letters between my mother and Frank Miller, dating back to before I was born." Jason opened the envelope carefully. Inside were several yellowed pages of handwritten correspondence. The first, dated nearly 41 years ago, contained phrases that left little room for interpretation. "Linda darling, we must be more careful. If Kenneth ever suspected the child isn't his. Remember Singapore next month? Tell him it's a shopping trip. We'll have our time then." "You know," Robert said, watching Jason's expression. "You know I'm not Kenneth's biological son." "Yes." "How long?" 3 days? Kenneth left a letter explaining everything. Robert absorbed this with surprising calm. "All my life, I've been groomed to protect the Robertson legacy, to become worthy of inheriting an empire I apparently have no blood right to." His laugh was bitter. "The irony is extraordinary. Is that why you wanted to meet? To confirm your parentage?" "No." Robert's eyes hardened. "I want to know what my mother and Frank did to Sarah Reynolds and her family. The complete truth." Jason studied him carefully. "Why now? Why do you suddenly care about a woman who died 30 years ago?" "Because I overheard them planning another accident, this time for you and your daughter." Robert leaned forward. "And because I found this," he placed a second envelope on the table. "Medical records. Kenneth's cancer isn't terminal. It's responding to treatment, but someone has been adding something to his medication. something that makes him seem worse than he is. Jason opened the second envelope with growing dread. Laboratory reports showed traces of various sedatives and heart rate depressants in Kenneth's blood samples, substances not prescribed by his doctors. "My mother," Robert continued, "has been slowly poisoning her husband while pretending to care for him devotedly. And I believe she did the same to her first husband, my supposed father, 20 years ago." The revelation hung between them like a physical presence. "Why come to me?" Jason asked. "Why not go to the police?" "Because I need to understand everything first. I need to know exactly what kind of monsters created me." Robert's voice cracked slightly. "And because I found something else in my mother's private safe. Something about the fire that killed Sarah Reynolds." Gregory had moved closer, seemingly engrossed in his drink, but listening intently. "What did you find?" Jason pressed. "Receipts for electrical components and accelerants, and a floor plan of your childhood home with specific areas marked." Robert met Jason's eyes directly. "She's kept them all these years like trophies." Gregory's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. The noise drew momentary attention, and when Jason looked back at Robert, the man's expression had changed. "That's him, isn't it? Your brother? The one who supposedly died in the fire?" Before Jason could respond, Robert continued. "The driver, G. I always wondered why Kenneth insisted on keeping him despite my mother's objections. Why he looked at him with such guilt." Gregory approached their table slowly, his scarred face impassive, but his eyes burning with decades of suppressed emotion. "He survived," Jason confirmed. "Martha saved him." Robert nodded slowly. "Martha, of course." He turned to Gregory. "You've been watching us all these years. Waiting, planning." Gregory simply stared back, neither confirming nor denying. "What happens now?" Robert asked, returning his attention to Jason. "You have Kenneth's evidence, I have mine. Together, it's enough to destroy my mother and Frank. But what about me? Am I collateral damage in your quest for justice?" It was the question Jason had been asking himself since reading Kenneth's letter. Robert was Linda's son, Frank's son, born of the two people responsible for his mother's death. Yet he was also a victim of their deception, shaped by lies not of his making. "That depends," Jason said carefully. "What do you want from this? The truth, all of it, and then?" Robert hesitated. "Then I want to make it right, whatever that means." Gregory placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. A silent question. Jason nodded, making his decision. Kenneth's birthday celebration is tomorrow night. The entire New York social elite will be there. "Yes," Robert confirmed. "Mother insisted it proceed despite his condition. The Robertson legacy must maintain appearances," she said. "Then that's where we'll end this," Jason declared. "In front of witnesses, with all the evidence laid bare." Gregory scribbled on a napkin. "Dangerous. Linda desperate." "I know," Jason acknowledged, "but it's time to bring everything into the light. For Mom, for us." He looked at Robert. "Are you with us?" Robert's gaze moved between the brothers, finally settling on Gregory's scarred face. Permanent evidence of Linda's capacity for cruelty. "Yes," he said quietly. "It's time this ended." As they finalized their plan, none of them noticed the elegant woman at a distant table. Her face hidden behind a menu, her manicured finger tapping a phone to end a call. Linda Robertson smiled thinly, leaving cash for her untouched drink, and slipped out the restaurant's side entrance. The stage was set for Kenneth's birthday celebration, though it would commemorate something very different than another year of the patriarch's life. It would mark the end of 30 years of deception, and the beginning of a reckoning long overdue. 6 months had passed since Kenneth Robertson's 85th birthday celebration, a night that had shattered the foundations of one of New York's oldest families and reshaped the lives of all involved. Jason stood in what had once been the grand ballroom of the Robertson mansion, now transformed into a spacious workshop. Restoration projects in various stages of completion filled custom-built work tables, while apprentices, mostly young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, moved purposefully between stations. Sunlight streamed through newly restored windows, highlighting the grain of woods being lovingly brought back to life. "Dad, Uncle Greg wants to know if you've finished the chair for Mrs. Patterson." Zoe bounded in, her school backpack bouncing against her side. At 8.5, she had adapted to their new life with remarkable resilience, treating the mansion as her personal playground. "Tell him another hour," Jason replied, smiling at his daughter's energy. How was school? We're learning about family trees, Zoe said, her expression turning thoughtful. I told them mine is really complicated. Jason laughed softly. That's one way to put it. The events of that fateful birthday celebration still played in his mind with cinematic clarity. The gathered New York elite, champagne flutes in hand, had watched in stunned silence as the carefully orchestrated facade of the Robertson family crumbled in real time. Linda, elegant in midnight blue, had been in the middle of a toast to Kenneth when the patriarch himself wheeled into the ballroom by his nurse, had struggled to his feet. His voice, weak but determined, had silenced the room. For 30 years, I've lived with the knowledge that my pride cost me my daughter. Tonight, I reclaim what remains of her legacy. I'd like to introduce my grandsons, Jason and Gregory Reynolds. The gasps had been audible as Jason and Gregory stepped forward, flanking their grandfather. Linda's face had drained of color, her champagne flute trembling visibly. This is absurd, she'd sputtered. Kenneth, your medication is being tampered with, Robert had interjected, stepping forward with the medical reports. By you, Mother. What followed was a carefully orchestrated revelation of evidence. Martha's recordings played over the mansion's sound system, financial records displayed on screens, and finally, Linda's own trophies from the fire that had killed Sarah Reynolds, cornered and exposed before the very social elite she'd spent a lifetime impressing. Linda had done the unthinkable. She'd confessed, her voice shifting from denials to justification. You have no idea what it's like, she'd said, her poise cracking for the first time. Being married to a man who can never let go of his precious first family. I did what was necessary to protect what was mine. The final bombshell, Robert's true parentage, had been revealed not by Jason or Gregory, but by Frank himself, arriving late to the party only to find his decades-old conspiracy unraveling in a misguided attempt to save himself. He'd confirmed everything, thinking a deal could still be made. Instead, both had left the mansion in police custody, charged with murder, attempted murder, and a host of financial crimes. 6 months later, their trials were still pending, but the evidence was overwhelming. The Robertson name had weathered its greatest scandal, emerging transformed rather than destroyed. Uncle Greg says to come to the music room when you're done, Zoe added, pulling Jason back to the present. Robert's coming for dinner, and Aunt Jessica made that pasta you like. I'll be there soon, Jason promised, returning to his careful sanding of the antique chair spindle. The family they'd formed in the aftermath was unconventional, but somehow right. Jason and Zoe occupying the east wing, Gregory in the former chauffeur's quarters, his choice. Robert in a modest apartment over the garage, also his choice. And Jessica overseeing the household with her natural efficiency. Kenneth, against all medical predictions, had rallied. Once the poisoning stopped, though still frail, he had lived long enough to see the Robertson Foundation renamed for his daughter, and to witness the mansion's transformation into something Sarah would have approved of. Part workshop, part school, part home. Jason finished his work and headed toward the music room, passing the newly restored library. The room's secret compartment remained, though now it held family photographs rather than hidden evidence. The black portrait had been moved to the most prominent wall, restored by Jason's own hands. The music room, once a formal space used primarily for show, had become the heart of their unusual household. As Jason entered, he found Gregory at the piano with Zoe, patiently guiding her through simple scales. His brother's therapy had been progressing steadily, while full speech remained difficult. He could now manage short sentences with effort, though he still preferred writing for complex communication. Sounds good, Gregory told Zoe, his voice raspy but clear enough to make her beam with pride. Robert entered from the opposite door, carrying a bottle of wine. The past months had softened his rigid bearing, though periods of melancholy still overtook him at times. Finding out your entire identity was built on lies tended to have that effect. Jason, he acknowledged with a nod. The Patterson restoration looks exceptional. Thanks, should be delivered next week. Their relationship remained complicated, neither friends nor enemies, but bound by shared trauma and a determination to rebuild something meaningful from the wreckage of the past. Kenneth joined them last, moving slowly with his walker, Jessica hovering nearby. At 85, He carried the weight of his past decisions visibly, but also the lightness of reconciliation. "My family," he said simply, surveying the room with clear eyes. Altogether, dinner was served in the informal dining room, conversation flowing easily between updates on the Foundation's work, Zoe's school projects, and Gregory's latest progress with his speech therapist. The heaviness of the past had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something they could carry together. After dinner, as the adults lingered over coffee, Zoe tugged at Gregory's sleeve. "Play the song," she whispered loudly. "The one Grandma Sarah liked." Gregory nodded, leading her back to the music room. The others followed, drawn by the gentle notes that soon filled the air. A lullaby that Martha had once hummed while cleaning, which she claimed Sarah had sung to her twin boys. Zoe sat beside Gregory on the piano bench, her small fingers occasionally joining his on the simpler notes. In the soft evening light, her profile showed hints of the grandmother she had never met. Jason stood by the black portrait, now understanding why Martha had risked so much to save it the night before the fire. It wasn't just a painting. It was proof of connections that no amount of wealth or social position could erase. Evidence that love persisted even when everything else burned away. Kenneth moved to stand beside him, gazing up at Sarah's face. "She would be proud," he said quietly, "of both of you and of her granddaughter." "I hope so," Jason replied. "I wish she could have seen all this." Gregory joined them, placing a hand on the ornate black frame. "She sees?" he managed, the words slow but clear. "She found us." As the last notes of the lullaby faded, the setting sun cast a particular ray through the western windows, illuminating the portrait in such a way that Sarah's loving gaze seemed to encompass everyone in the room. The shadow of the frame stretched across the floor, encircling them in what looked remarkably like an embrace. "She never left," Jason agreed softly. Outside, the restored gardens bloomed with new life, carefully tended native plants replacing the formal European specimens Linda had preferred. The Robertson Mansion, once a monument to wealth and status, had been reborn as something far more valuable, a true home, where the broken pieces of multiple lives had been carefully restored and fitted together to create something stronger than before. Like the antique woods Jason lovingly brought back to life, the family had discovered that with proper care, what is damaged can be made beautiful again, sometimes even more beautiful for having been broken.